have you walked the Camino de Santiago? If so, I would love to hear from you and I would love to interview you for the podcast so we can pick your brains and help others walk the way and have the time of their lives as well. So if you have walked the Camino and would like to be part of the podcast, like to be interviewed by me for the podcast, please get in touch via our Facebook page, which is Camino de Santiago Pilgrims Podcast. Send me a PM on there or a DM on our Instagram page, which is Pilgrims Podcast. Okay, so DM or PM us on Facebook or Instagram. And if you do that, I, as a thank you, will send you a Kindle copy, an ebook copy of my best-selling book, which has 4.5 out of 5 from 383 reviews on Amazon. One of those latest 5-star reviews reads just like this. An inspiring read is the title. One of the best books I have read in a long time. Very engaging, thoughtful, funny, insightful, and inspiring. Rarely do I find myself underlining passages or quotes in a book. Some great tips too, like carrying a fake wallet and traveling light. Highly recommended. That was reviewed on the 31st of July this year. So yes, I will send you a free copy of that. The Only Way is West. If you are kind enough to give me your time and do an interview for the podcast, because without you pilgrims, you lovely pilgrims, there is no podcast. So without no further ado, let's get into this week's episode. It's the searchers I seek, the wisdom that they speak, the lessons that they teach, just a searcher like me. Hello there, fellow peregrinos. Welcome to El Camino de Santiago Pilgrims podcast, where we talk about planning, preparation and packing for walking the Camino de Santiago, as well as tips, tricks, hacks and stories to whet your appetite. Did I say whet? I meant to say wet, to whet your appetite for your journey to Santiago. If you're a first-time pilgrim, you're in the right place. If you're a returning pilgrim looking to refine your routine and learn from others that have walked before you, then you're also in the right place. And if you're looking to hear from a pilgrim that walks the Camino this year during pandemic times, which is very, very, very brave. Catherine de Torcy from Texas walked the Camino Frances from May 19th this year to June 18th this year. So before we find out about your victorious arrival into Santiago de Compostela, Catherine, please tell us how, where and why you first decided to make the brave steps of the road to Santiago.
Yeah, of course. So back in March of this year, I was in my last semester of college and I had a job lined up for after graduation. And in March, I started asking myself a lot of questions about how do I want to live my life, what my beliefs are, what do I value in life. And I kind of fell into a mini existential crisis, and I knew that I had to take some time off after graduation to just be in nature and find myself. I feel like nature is a place where I can do a lot of self-reflection and just find a lot about who I am. And I try to see all the options that I could do. And one day, my brother called me and he asked me, why don't you go and do the Camino? And the first thing that came into my mind was, isn't this a pilgrimage for very religious people? And my brother was like, I don't know, just look into it. And I was like, okay. My roommate had done part of the Camino in the past, and my boyfriend, now fiance actually, has always wanted to do it with his mom. So I had heard of the Camino before, and I decided to do research on it. I went across some websites, I watched YouTube videos, I heard some podcasts, including this podcast, and once I had an idea of what the Camino was, I instantly knew that I had to go there. I didn't ask myself if it was the right time to do it, if I should do something else. It was so weird. It was as if the Camino was a magnet and it was pulling me into it. And without second guessing myself, I decided that I would go and walk the Camino.
That's a lovely story, and I want to talk about a few things there. Firstly, you and I have something in common, that it was my brother that also said to me, why don't you go and walk the Camino, when I was having a similar existential crisis in my life. So it's nice to hear
Mhm.
that we're having some influences from our siblings there, positive influences as well. Also, congratulations on becoming engaged.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, just quickly, how did he do it? Can we give your boyfriend, so your fiance, get him in the good books here, some kudos?
Yeah,
Tell us the
it was
story
actually
quickly.
on Thursday. He blindfolded me and then walked me to a lake and had a little setup and said his speech and then was like, "You can take off the blindfold now," and then proposed. And
Pass me the
it was
tissues.
really
I'm
cute.
crying over here. That's
Yeah, we had a
lovely.
little picnic there. It was great.
That's not bad considering it's not a competition. But I did take my wife to Paris to Venice and sung to her on a gondola with a song that I wrote. But like I said, it's not a
That's
competition.
great.
It doesn't matter. No, I'm only joking. Your fiance obviously went above and beyond there. Lovely view
Yeah.
that. In fact, it's my anniversary on Tuesday, my wedding anniversary. So maybe I'll take my wife to a lake as well. It's a bit cold for that where I live in England now. But anyway, so
Perfect.
brilliant. So it was an existential crisis after taking your first job. And when you're asking those questions, why are we here? What's it all about? How do we want to live our lives? What a massive,
Mhm.
massive question and a brave question to ask ourselves. Possibly one we've all been asking ourselves in recent pandemic times. So I'm going to circle back to the existential crisis at the end and see if we found some answers on the Camino about that.
Yeah.
But before we do that, so the time frame between making the decision to go and actually going wasn't too much, wasn't too long.
I mean, in March, I decided that I would go, and I left in May.
How
So
did
about
you how did you float this idea with your fiance? Because obviously, when he proposes, it's not like let's get engaged, then you disappear for a month. What's how do you kind of
yeah,
scale that one?
he was so cool about it. I mean, he's always wanted to do the Camino, and he's always been very big in supporting me with my travel adventures. So he was like, "Go for it." And
Great.
he's working, and so he wasn't able to take time off. Obviously, otherwise he would have come with me. But he was like, "No, go for it, do it." He was very respectful.
Sounds like you found a good one there.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so you got onto the Camino Frances. Now, would you like to explain how you managed to get onto the Camino and kind of, shall we say, use your dual citizenship to your advantage? Explain that.
So how I kind of prepared to go to the Camino?
Well, how did you, being from America, and what were the regulations for Americans at
Oh,
the time, and
yes.
how you actually managed to make it happen with your,
Yes.
like you explained to me, your French passport?
That's a whole other story.
Tell
So,
us, tell us.
um, yeah, so I have dual citizenships. I have both American and French citizenship. So, even though the borders were closed for Americans, as a French citizen, I was able to go. So, I had already bought, once I knew, I bought my tickets. I think it was like for a couple days before the Camino. And I bought my plane tickets and I was ready to go. And in April, I was doing some extra research and I actually realized that there were regulations in Spain. They were in a state of emergency. And so all those little communities, it was illegal to cross them. And you have to cross them on the Camino. And so the Camino wasn't closed technically, but you couldn't really do it because the communities were closed. And they were going to review the rules on May 9th. And I had my plane ticket May 14th. And so that was really stressful for me. I will say I did get a bit of anxiety from that just because once I found that out, I didn't know if I was going to be able to actually walk the Camino or not. And I was trying to find a plan B. I was like, maybe I'll just go hike in France. I don't know what to do. And I didn't know if I should buy the material because I didn't have all the Camino gear or if I should wait. And I just decided to wait until May 10th. So 3 days before I leave, I actually bought all the gear at the store, and because May 10th they said that the communities were open and that it was fine to do the Camino.
What a relief, huh?
Yes, it was a big relief. It was a little scary just because the Pilgrims office in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port opened on May 17th, and I was planning on starting the next day. So that was that was a little. I don't know. It was everything was opening up again, so I thought there was going to be no one there, and I was going to be alone.
Yeah, it was tentatively opening up, and you managed to
Hmm.
get onto the Camino Francés, from the way you said it in that beautiful French accent there, which I could not compete with. Jean Pied Pour, something like that, right?
Yeah.
So in SJPP we'll call it, because that's a lot easier for me.
Yes.
So you managed to get on there, and
Hmm.
it's such a your situation is so typical of the experiences of many pilgrims today, that they've just got to keep an eye on how things develop, because you and I could talk about on whatever the date is today, Sunday the 12th of September, what are the regulations today, but by the time someone
Yeah.
listens to this podcast in 1 month, it may have changed.
It's
So
always changing.
just like you did, keep a close eye on the regulations, on the news, and just keep your fingers crossed as well. I mean, I know there's a lot of pilgrims that are returning now. American pilgrims have been able to go back. I've received some messages. So again, just keep an eye on developments, a close eye. I'm relieved to hear that you managed to get on the Camino, to start tackling your existential crisis with the support of your boyfriend, with the encouragement from your brother, and you, by the sounds of it, didn't have much time to prepare and pack. So maybe for someone else that's not got much time, how did you manage to squeeze all of that complicated issue into just a couple of months, couple of days even, by the sounds of it?
Hmm.
What did you do?
Yeah.
What
So
shop did you go to? What did you learn?
yes.
What did you
So
prioritize?
uh yeah, I was really lucky because my roommate had done it, and she had her backpack from the Camino with everything still in it.
No.
And so one night she just came downstairs and she pulled out everything. She was like, "You're gonna need this. You're gonna need that." And I was like, "What?" I had not even thought about it. Um, and so
What was
that
an
was very
example of this
helpful.
and that? Give us an example. You're going to need this. What was the one thing you were like, oh, do I really need that?
I mean, I don't know if it's my roommate who likes to have nice things, but she was like, I was gonna go in Nike shorts, and she was like, "No, you need to go with these Patagonia shorts. They're so much nicer. You'll see. You won't regret it." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And then she was like, "Your socks, they need to be wool." And she was telling me all these things that I didn't really know about, and I was like, "Wow, she's fancy." But then I thought about it, and I was like, "Okay, maybe you should invest in good gear, and not get a hiking backpack from Walmart. That's a superstore in the United States. That's very cheap, but nice. And maybe like invest in a nicer backpack." And so once she showed me everything, I was like, okay, I actually need to go to a hiking store. So I went to a store. It's called REI. We have it in Texas, and they have a lot of really nice hiking gear.
That one's come up quite a few times. REI, those are the letters, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, so REI, and we've heard that before. And apparently, you can take a pair of shoes and or try a pair of shoes for 1 month, and if you feel they're good, you keep them. If you don't, you try another pair.
That's awesome.
So we've been told. Okay, so REI was your shortcut, and not you were obviously this was just meant to be, because everything was falling into place for you. Your boyfriend giving you his blessing, your roommate just having their backpack already packed. I mean, what are the chances of that? Which is brilliant. And now I'm going to
Mhm.
put you on the spot here, Catherine, and ask you the $1 million question, which is, if you had to take one other thing with you tomorrow, were you to go back to the Camino, as well as your clothes, backpack, shoes, and phone, because everyone has a phone these days, what other thing would you take with you? You could only take one other
Ooh,
thing.
yes. So, um, I feel like I had everything. On the Camino, it was, I don't know, I really liked that minimalistic
Hmm.
aspect of it and not having too much. So I really do think that, your phone, your clothes, your backpack is enough. Obviously, bring a credit card and some money.
Yeah.
Um, but one thing that I would bring that I didn't bring would be my Hoka tennis shoes. They're the Clifton Sevens. Um, I don't know if you've heard of those tennis shoes, but they're the best, and they just don't hurt on your feet. I don't know. They're so good, and I didn't bring them, and I actually, we'll probably talk about it later, but I actually had a very bad experience with my feet hurting from my hiking shoes. So I would
Hmm.
definitely bring those shoes.
You and me both. So you basically said what you're saying you've learned is that you don't need the big kind of heavy duty hiking boots.
Yeah,
Just a pair of tennis shoes is enough for you.
for the Francis, yes. Maybe if you're doing a different Camino,
Mm.
it depends. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're likely to. I mean, I think as long as you've got some waterproof footwear, tennis shoes, or any kind of like trainer. Sorry, that's a UK word there. Sneaker is what I guess what you say in
Hmm.
America. I don't know what they say in other countries, but yeah, um, a tennis shoe, a sneaker, a trainer with that's waterproof with good support would be enough. You don't need the hiking
Yeah.
boots. I mean,
Yeah.
if you wear them, great. I mean, it's not a problem if you've already worn them in. But my wife had terrible blisters from a pair of hiking boots. I had terrible blisters from a really good pair of hiking boots. I spent a lot of money on. It's just unnecessary. The heat as well, because you get a lot of heat, and
Hmm.
that's where the wool socks will help as well, wicker away that moisture and that sweat and stuff. But okay, so now we're building up a little picture. So we got some wool socks, minimalistic amount of clothing. I mean, as as a as a female walking the Camino, what would you say to 52% of the listeners of the podcast who are also female? I mean, what is a minimalistic kit list that you could get by with,
Yeah.
more or less?
Hmm. I would say I brought two pairs of shorts,
Mm-hmm.
but to be honest, I would have been okay with just one. And one pair of leggings. Get leggings with pockets because they come in very handy. And then I had one tank top, one t-shirt, one long sleeve shirt.
And that's
And
it.
then, yeah, three pairs of socks and the other stuff. And a raincoat. I had a very, very light puffer jacket
Yeah.
um, that would fit into a very small patch, and that came in handy for the cold nights. That was it.
And sometimes the cold mornings as well. If you're an early starter,
Hmm.
that comes in really handy as well.
Yeah.
Great advice. Okay, so we talked a little bit about packing, and just want to talk, if we can, about your feet. Tell us about your feet. What happened?
All right, I suffered a lot. Sorry, the first couple of days. So I did not train for the Camino. Uh, in the U.S., you barely walk. I know the Europeans walk a lot, but here we use our cars for everything. And so, even though I think I'm a pretty athletic person, I like to work out, 5 to 6 times a week. My body was still not prepared for everyday walking, and so after 5 days into the Camino, I ended up getting a really bad tendonitis on the outer side of my left foot. And I think it was from the hiking boots. I don't know. I had those hiking ankle boots. They're very basic, they're the Columbia brand. And I had worn them before, but on the Camino, after those 5 days, once I would wear them, my foot would hurt so much. I I couldn't put them back on. And so luckily I had brought my chacos. If you don't know what chacos are, they're sandals with straps and you can walk with them. And they're also waterproof. But my hiking boots would weigh so much in my bag and they were so heavy that I decided that I didn't want to walk with them anymore and just because they were hurting so much. And so I remember we were in Logroño and the morning I was leaving and I saw one of my pilgrim friends in a bar having breakfast with other pilgrims that I met the night before. And so I went in, I asked them if they were interested in those shoes because I was going to throw away my hiking shoes, right? And one of the girls in the group was like, "Oh, what shoe size are you?" And we ended up having the same shoe size. And she was like, "Let me try them on." I was like, "Okay." And then she was like, "Why don't you wear my shoes? Let's trade shoes for the day." And I was like, "What?" And so I ended up walking in a stranger's shoes all day long. Um, and she walked in mine, and we ended up walking together all day long, and we got along really well. And I met her group that I really liked, and so I ended up staying with them. And the next day, she wanted her shoes back, and so I left mine in front of a church. And I was wearing my chacos, but they didn't really hold my feet well enough. And one of the pilgrims from our group had hiking sandals that he wasn't wearing. And then he offered me to wear them because he thought it would be better for the support. And so I agreed, and I ended up walking with his sandals until we got to Burgos. So for about 5 days. And once we were in Burgos, I found the shoes that I had been daydreaming about for the past week. My feet were so much better. Walking was so much easier. I don't know. I really did get out of my comfort zone by relying on other pilgrims for shoes, though. But I was just really happy when I got my shoes, and my feet were so much better.
So, as they say, and you've probably heard this phrase, this expression many times, is the Camino provides, and it provided you with someone to swap shoes with, someone to
Yeah.
lend you a pair of hiking sandals, and then, sorry, I just want to confirm that I heard. Okay, you got a new pair in Burgos.
Mhm.
Right. Okay. Now, you touched on the issue of tendonitis here, which is something I've experienced on the Camino, and I
Yeah.
experienced it when I upped my kilometre level quite considerably, quite dramatically. It wasn't a gradual increase. I went from, put an extra 10, 20 on to what I was already doing. And like you said, you got it at the start, which is not unusual, I don't think, because your body's still adjusting. And could you attribute that tendonitis to the footwear? Do you know what was the cause of it and what you've done in future or since to make sure it hasn't happened again? And so the other
I
pilgrims don't do the
yeah.
same thing?
I don't know what caused it. I do
Mm.
know that the ankle boots, when I would walk, it would dig into the Achilles tendon, and I
Yeah.
did start getting a little bit of pain there. And that's when I was like, okay, these boots are probably not the best, but just get shoes that you've walked in before and you
There you
feel
go.
so comfortable.
Yeah.
They should feel like slippers.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, they should. That's a great way to approach it. If they don't feel like slippers, they're not the right shoe.
Yeah.
Like it. Okay. And it's quite possible that tendonitis at the start was because, like you said, you do, even if you do go to the gym, even if you do swim, even if you're quite active, there's nothing like pounding the asphalt or the turf hour upon hour, day after day. If you've never done it before, your body will take some time to adjust to it. So it could just be that. For anyone else that maybe suffers from tendonitis, I know something that came in handy for me was getting some gait analysis, GAIT, gait analysis, not gait as in your front gate on your house, but gait analysis, and looking at the way your feet move, and that can look at if there's any imbalances that can sometimes be amplified when you're doing so much walking. So now we talked about hard times. We talked about hard times, which is kind of adjusting to the physical challenge that the Camino brings, walking every day, hour after hour. But what about a high moment? Tell us about one of the high moments, from the low to the high. What's a standout high moment from you and your Camino Frances?
For sure. Honestly, I feel like once my feet got better and my body wasn't hurting, every day was a high moment. I felt on top of the world every single day after that. But there was this time that I can think of. I wouldn't say it felt my highest, but it was an experience that does stick to me. So the we slept in Hospital de los Virgo in the night before, and we were walking towards Santa Catarina de Somoza, and I was walking with some friends in the morning, and we were sharing some food. Sometimes we would just put our food in the middle and share it. And I remember I had a peach and a nectarine that I saved for myself, and I was pretty excited to eat it. And I guess that my friends thought it was for all of us, and so they just took them out without asking and shared them. And I think I was just really tired, and so I got upset that they took my food without really asking. And I don't know why, but I held a grudge about it. And I was in a really bad mood for the day. And when we were in the Camino, we crossed this area. It was like, I don't, a little home, but not a home because it's outdoors in the middle of the Camino. And there's this man that lives there. His name is either David or Daniel. I don't remember, but he made it his home. And this man has walked over 12,000 kilometers, and 3,000 of them he did barefoot. And he lives in this area in the middle of nowhere on the Camino without electricity, without Wi-Fi, and he's been there for the past 12 years giving food to pilgrims.
Where more or less is this?
It's between Santa Catalina
Mm-hmm.
and no, it's between Hospital de los Virgo and Santa Catalina. I have a picture of it on my phone, and the spot says San Justo de la Vega.
San Justo de la Vega. Okay.
Yes.
De la
And
Vega.
yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
Carry on. Sorry.
No, you're good. But yeah, so basically he just lives on the Camino and he just gives out food to the pilgrims. And I got there and he just made me an orange juice, and I sat on the table, and then I just looked in a certain direction, and right there on the table I saw the exact same looking peaches and nectarines that we had in the morning. And he was like, grab as many as you want. And I was so overwhelmed because this guy is just giving his life to just give to pilgrims and help them out. And I was right there getting mad about a peach and a nectarine. I was like, what is going on? And I don't know why, but I felt so overwhelmed by this intense emotion inside of me. And I just had to step out and I just began to tear up. It was so strange. And I didn't understand what was happening to me, but I just had this huge feeling of love just overwhelming me inside, and it was so strong, and it lasted all day long. Um, that was a very intense moment for me on the Camino, and just I don't know, it was such a random story, but that
No,
feeling that I
it's
had was so overwhelming.
if anyone that's walked the Camino will be able to relate to exactly what you're saying. I'm sure they've had very similar moments, and it's a great example of of the universal law,
Mm-hmm.
belief, whatever you want to call it, what goes around comes around. I mean, whether you like it or not, you gave some fruit to your fellow pilgrims that you were so looking forward to. And let's be honest, when we're tired, when we're fatigued, we're not always the best version of ourselves. We can be maybe a little bit snappy if we haven't had much sleep, if we're dehydrated. Let's be kind to ourselves and just say we can't always be perfect. And you managed to take that lesson from this guy that was giving everything when, by the sounds of it, he had so little materialistically. And yeah, it can be a great level of the Camino. It can definitely put you on to correct your thinking. That's what I think. Is the
For
Camino?
sure.
It's a great teacher, the Camino, always. So, thanks for sharing that story, and thanks for being so honest as well. Because you're putting your foibles out there for the listeners, and it's nice to hear that that you can accept yourself, that we're not always perfect, all of us. So thanks for being so candid and honest as well about that. So this guy is in San Justo de la Vega,
Hmm.
and on the Camino Frances, he'd walked, you said 12,000 kilometers more or less barefoot.
Yes,
Wow,
3,000 of them barefoot.
3,000 of them barefoot,
Yeah,
12,000 kilometers, and there he is giving everything. And yeah, I mean it's the magic of the Camino in operation, and it's why we want to talk about it, and we want to go back, and why it's definitely a blueprint for life, life in the
for
Camino
sure.
in many ways. Okay, let's talk about something that what surprised you most about yourself, and what surprised you most about the Camino.
Yeah. What surprised me most about myself on the Camino is how social I was. I feel like I'm a pretty social person, but back home, I don't know, compared to a lot of people, I feel more on the side of middle with extroverted and introverted. And on the Camino, I was so extroverted for some reason. I met so many pilgrims just because I was so curious about getting to know their stories. And I also spoke to so many locals, and I was so open to having conversations with them. And I did not expect that. I thought that I would be more of a hermit on the Camino trying to figure my life out, but I ended up having more of a social Camino. Um, and then what surprised me most about the Camino was, I would say, um, let's see, I would say that, sorry. Okay. What surprised me most about the Camino was, oh my goodness, I'm blinking. Oh, yes. Okay. It was how hippie it is. I thought that it would be more religious and that people would go more for religious reason, but people go there to figure themselves out, and everyone is kind of in the same boat. And then there's so many little spots on the Camino that are so cute and that look so hippie. I don't know if that makes sense to you.
It does perfectly, yeah. I mean, whether you're walking for religious reasons or whether it's for adventurous reasons, whether it's because you want answers to existential questions and dilemmas that you're having, I think the one thing we all have in common is we're looking for answers on the Camino. I know I certainly have been every single time I've gone, and it's very quirky. You know, that's another word I
Hmm.
would use to describe the Camino. It's very quirky. It's very
Yeah.
unique. I think it's a good diving a diving board to go into. You said you were very sociable. I walked the Camino this year in July and August,
Okay.
and one of the things I found, maybe it was just me, was that because of COVID, people were socializing less. Maybe it was because I was with my wife and my senses for friendship weren't as sharp as if I was on my own. But walking in COVID times, how did you find as a lone female meeting people, being able to walk with people? Was it easy for you?
Yeah. At first,
Good.
before I left, I thought that I would be alone on the Camino, and people said, "You're never alone on the Camino." And I was like, "Yes, but COVID." And we were about 30 people or 40 people who we would see each other, um, who were on the Camino around the same time, basically, at each stage. And so we really knew each other. We got really close, and we all socialized. Yeah, it was actually it was not a concern. We were all very social and had a good time.
And you met people from all over the world, or was it from a few countries? Because I know for myself, when I went this summer, that it was I met mainly Spanish people, and
Yeah, it
and
was.
because everyone's on staycations, like so just like people are in the UK. I don't know about in America, but we're tending to go on holiday within the UK, and the Spanish are doing the same. So I think there's I haven't looked at the statistical difference, but I know from previous Caminos I've been on that I've met mainly Spanish people this time, rather than people from, as I did before, from Germany, from Denmark, from America, from Korea, Japan, China. I've met people from everywhere. Hungary. This time it was mainly Spanish. What about you?
I would say it was 50% Spanish
Mm.
and then 50% other places. So there were people also from the Netherlands, from France, Germany, Austria, just European countries. There wasn't anyone from the United States. I
Mm.
think there was one Korean. Um, yeah.
That's interesting to. It might be just because I was on the Camino Inglés and the Camino Portuguese, and those are like the smaller
Mm-hmm.
caminos compared to the Frances. So, and more people are able to walk the week-long caminos to get their Compostela. But I'm just actually intrigued as to how it was on the Frances, for if there was that international merry band of pilgrims that I'd encountered before that I didn't encounter this time. So it's good to hear that there is some element of that on the Frances, and you encountered that, and that's part of the magic as well. Without a doubt, is the meeting people from other places. So let's give us some quick recommendations. Tell us a favourite albergue, one you'd recommend.
Ooh, I have three. Is that okay?
Go for it. Give us the three. Give us the locations
All
if you
right.
can and the names.
Sounds good. So the first one is in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. It's called Le Chemin vers l'Étoile.
Yep, very famous that
And
one. Yeah.
it's great. I would say it's a little on the pricier side compared to other albergues, but it's really nice. The owner is just an amazing person and gave me some really good advice before starting. And then the second one is El Paso. It's in something de la Vega.
Okay. El Paso
And
in something de la Vega. Okay. Tell us about that.
let me try to find it.
You tell
But
us about it, and I'll have a quick
okay,
look. I'll have a quick look for it.
awesome. Sounds good. But that place was just beautiful. The food was delicious, and the hospitaleros were so nice. And my friends and I, we just connected so well with the hospitaleros, and they made us dinner. They made us drinks, and we just spent all night talking with them and hanging out with them. And they were great. So that was the second one. I actually have their business card right here. So it was in Vega de Valcarce. That's the
That's
place.
it.
Yes.
And that's spelled Vega, Vega, Devalcarce, Valcarce. Vega de Valcarce, and that's called El Paso. So look that place up, everybody. I'm afraid I won't be putting the links on the Facebook page anymore, just because I don't have the time that I used to have when I was running this podcast. But you can look that up yourself. That is Vega de Valcarce, Valcarce, El Paso. And the last place?
It's La Casa de las Sonrisas in Grañón. It's a donativo. It's really cute, and we all had dinner together there, and we sang, and there was a guitar, so we also played the guitar at night.
Beautiful.
It was fun.
Is
Yeah.
that the one in the church?
No, that one is
Ah,
in Grañón. It's
okay.
like a small little albergue. It's a donativo, and it's so pretty. It also has a little bit of a hippie vibe, I guess. I don't know how you describe that
So this place
Camino.
is in Grañón as well?
Mhm.
Okay, so La Casa de la Sonrisa, which is the house of smiles, or the smiling house, whatever you
Yeah.
want to translate it. La Casa de la Sonrisa, so La Casa de Sonrisa, Sonrisa, and yes, smiley, happy, singing people. That's what we like to hear on the Camino. Thanks for those 3 recommendations, Catherine. What about somewhere to eat? We know we all got pilgrim hunger. We could eat our own
Yes.
legs if we could on the Camino. We're gonna eat our plums. We want our plums, don't we, on the Camino? But tell us a place that you recommend.
Yeah, so I try to not eat out too much just because I don't know. I feel like the food in Spain can be very repetitive at times. But when it was for the pulpo in Galicia, that I wanted to try it so bad. So I tried it in 2 places. There's this really popular restaurant in Melide, and it's called Pulperia a Ganarcha. And that one is really popular for the pilgrims, apparently. So I tried it there, and it was good. But my favorite one was in Ocebreiro, in this very small restaurant, and it's called Venta Celta. I was told that by a local that the best pulpo was in Ocebreiro. And so when I was there, I just walked into this restaurant. I was like, "Oh, this looks nice." And I just walked into there, and I asked the people there which place in this town had the best pulpo, and they directly told me theirs was the best in the world. And I thought they were just trying to sell it to me, which they probably were, but it was so good. I don't know. It was the best thing I've ever had.
It's curious, isn't it? So the best octopus would be at the top of a mountain,
Yeah.
because you wonder how they would get out there. But so it's called the place again, please.
It's called so it's in
Vent,
Ocebreiro, Venta Celta.
Venta Celta, as in
Mhm.
Celta,
Yes.
and Venta, Venta Celta.
Mhm.
Perfect. So the pulpo, which means octopus. So that's where you can find a bold statement here, and you can test it out for yourselves. The best octopus in Galicia, and it's a big thing in Galicia, the pulpo. So make sure you get in and try that if you do make it to the top of the mountain. Thank you very much, Catherine, for that great recommendation. So I think what we're going to do now is we're going to dive into what we call the quick fire round, some Camino quickies, and I'm going to ask you some short, sharp questions, and we'll get some short, sharp answers. And the first one is your favorite Camino blog, vlog, book, film.
Okay, so I do really like this podcast. But there was also a forum by Ivar Redke that was very helpful with the whole COVID and Camino situation. And he also has a YouTube channel, and he would every week he would get on it and he would say how the COVID situation is doing and how it's affecting the Camino
That's a
and
great
how the rules
resource.
are
Yeah,
changing.
that's the
That was
Camino de
very helpful.
Santiago.me, isn't it?
Yes, and his YouTube channel is just his name, and I think it's Ivar Redke.
Okay, so IVAR, Casa Ivar, I think it's called. So Casa
Casa
Ivar.
Ivar, yeah.
Okay, so that's a really good tip to keep abreast of developments on the COVID situation, and like you said as well, that can change from region to region, to province, from Galicia to Castilla y León to La Rioja. So yeah, that's a good place to keep abreast of that. So favorite food and or drink on the Camino.
Oof. So let's go with drinks. Some good beer, or they had Clara, which is like a lemony beer, and then the red wine was also delicious just because it grows there and they make it there. So that was really good. And then the favorite food, every morning I would stop at a cafe and I would always have a toast with like tomato puree on top and
Hmm.
jamon serrano and olive oil, and oh my goodness, it was so good. It was very filling. It was perfect for the hike.
It's like their staple breakfast as well. It's the pan con
Mm-hmm.
tomate with the
Pan con tomate.
that's it,
Yeah.
with the oil and the salt and the tomato kind of grated into it. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
One thing you wished you'd packed.
I'm gonna say it again. My tennis shoes, just because I suffered so much for my feet with my hiking shoes.
One thing you didn't need and wouldn't take again.
Okay, so for some reason, I thought because of COVID, I don't know, I read it somewhere, and so I thought that you had to bring your own dishes and that they wouldn't provide them in albergues. And so I brought a little like hiking dish case with like the fork and the plate, and I never used it. I mean, we didn't need it. They would give us actual dishes like plates and stuff. So I just left it in albergue. And then also I brought a guidebook because I thought it would be useful, but I never used it and it was just heavy. So I also left that in an albergue.
So don't take your dishes and maybe reconsider the guidebook. Who knows? I did learn from someone from a previous podcast. I actually took photos of every page on their guidebook on their phone so they could just slide across, which is quite clever. So take a bit of time, but save you the wait. Right, a quote or mantra for tough times on the road.
Ooh. So it's the wind howls, but the mountains remain still. And so basically, when I was in Castro Jerez, there was this beautiful little church with music inside and a bunch of little symbolic things you could take, like quotes and papers, and it had pillows on the floor and a fountain. It was really nice, and I picked up a quote, and that's the quote that came out. And to me, it represents that when everything in the world is going crazy, the most important thing is to be like a mountain and just remain calm and to not let these things affect you too much. And that was very useful.
Beautiful. I love it. My wife and I were going through our photos of the last Camino last night, kind of slideshow on the TV,
Hmm.
hours upon hours. And you are the sky, everything else is just the weather, which I thought was very nice as well. It's kind of on the similar train of thought. So, a guilty pleasure that you may have carried with you, which was maybe the plates, I don't know, or something else?
A guilty pleasure I carried with me. It was Principe cookies. I don't know if you know them.
I
They're like,
do, yeah.
yeah, they're two cookies and they make a sandwich with chocolate in the middle. And I always had them on me and I was always eating them. They were so good and really, really good for some quick energy.
Gave you the pilgrim power, the
Yeah.
Principe to cookies. Okay, that's definitely a guilty pleasure. So well done you for treating yourself. A
Oh, thank you.
Spanish product or shop that may have come in useful.
Yeah. I would say when I was in Pamplona, I I needed hiking sticks. I went to the supermarket here in the US and I bought like very, very cheap hiking sticks and they broke within 2 or 3 days. And so I ended up buying some in Pamplona and they were so helpful.
I think you've already mentioned a Camino app or resource that you used before. So I'm going to ask, maybe put you on the spot here, one that wasn't in the questions. A social media account on the Camino or something, a personality that you'd recommend following or you do follow
Yeah,
that you like.
I I don't have social media.
Good
So,
on you.
yes, I would not be able to answer that one.
No. Okay. Well, I think I should take a leaf out of your book and get rid of social media as well because I have a love-hate relationship with it. But okay. So now, many believe, Catherine, the Camino has angels. That the Camino provides that the Camino is a spirit and magic energy you won't find anywhere else on the planet. Do you have any stories from the Camino that show that magic and spirit is alive, just like the one of the guy giving you his food?
I think that was the main story, but
Hmm.
I just remember walking on the Camino and feeling a lot of energies from it. People have walked on it for over 1,000 years, and I could definitely feel it. I do have this story about just how much the Camino takes care of you, and I don't know. Basically, it was one of the last days. I think it was the second to last day, and everyone stopped in Asua. It's a town on the Camino, and basically because there were a lot of people towards the end, the only albergue that had room kind of looked like a hospital, and we didn't really want to stay there for our last night. And so my friend and I decided to keep on walking, and we saw that on the Buen Camino app that there was an albergue in the next town. And so we got to the next town and we couldn't find it. And we looked on the app and it actually said that you had to walk off the Camino for a couple kilometers,
Mm.
2 or 3 kilometers to be there. And so we were like, let's just go. And my friend had called previously and done a reservation. And so we decided to walk towards it, and we just find ourselves walking next to a highway for 30 to 45 minutes. And it was just very unsettling walking next to all the cars. And when we finally got to the albergue, no one was there. Everything seemed closed, but the door was cracked open, and there was this creepy sensation in the air, and our gut feeling just told us to not spend the night there. And so we decided to keep on walking and try to find a way to find the Camino again. And so we were still walking next to the highway for so long. We had to cross a roundabout. The air was so gloomy and it was raining a bit. And we passed through this little town with a bunch of dogs that were barking everywhere. My friend and I, we just looked at each other and we thought that we were in a nightmare and we didn't know what was going on. And after walking for an extra hour, suddenly out of the blue, we see our little arrow and we see the Camino out of nowhere. And we were just so happy. And once we got on it, everything felt fine again and we felt so safe. And it's as if the Camino really does take care of you and you just need to follow it and stay on the Camino.
It's safe, it's secure, it's familiar, isn't it? When
Mm-hmm.
you know, just a yellow arrow it was going to take you to a place where you're going to eventually find a roof. You're going to eventually find something to eat. You're eventually going to find your tribe, the Pilgrim tribe, and you do. What you're saying is you felt a sense of security from getting back to what was familiar and what you know.
Mm-hmm.
Where did you end up staying?
We ended up staying in, oh, I don't remember the name, but in this albergue a little bit far away. So we ended up walking way more than we expected to.
But you found
But
somewhere to stay in the end
mm-hmm,
that was
yeah, we
safe.
did.
Well,
Yes.
as the Camino motto says, "Ultrea," which means move forward with courage. You did that, and you ended up going way further than you ever thought you could. So I think that's another lesson we can all take away. That there's so much more beyond than what we can do. So much more than we think we can, which is I don't know if you've ever heard of a guy called David Goggins. He calls it the 40% rule, and he says, when you think you're done, you're only at 40%. There's a lot more, and I really like that guy, and I like that approach. And you mentioned an app there, the Buen Camino app. Tell us how you used that, what you used it for.
I was so helpful. I would use it just to find where I would sleep that same night. And I don't know if it's still like that, but when I went, we had to call in advance and make a reservation
Mm.
for the albergues. And that app has all the information. It has the phone numbers, the pricing, and all the albergues. And so I would use it every day to make reservations.
I think that's a really good point as well, especially in pandemic times. A lot of the hotels and the albergs, all their occupancies are reduced depending on how bad the situation is in that region. And when my wife and I were in the Camino Inglés and the Portuguese last month, everywhere we turned up to without reserving was completo. It was full
Oh,
everywhere.
wow.
We could not get into anywhere where we just turned up to. In the end, we had to make phone calls and we had to go knocking on doors. So one lesson I took, a big difference between pre-pandemic times and pandemic times, is that you could turn up in the past. How about for you? Could you just turn up in many places, or did you pre-book?
It really depends. So at the beginning, honestly, you didn't even have to make reservations because there were so little people
Yeah,
there. Um, but we still did just to be safe.
right.
And then after I would either make the reservation a couple hours before I got there, or sometimes I wouldn't even make them and I would be fine. But once you hit Saria, which is the town for the last 100 kilometers, there are so many people and you just have to make reservations and you
Yeah,
have to make them early.
yeah, yeah. It's definitely good advice. That make it early, make reservations. Better to be safe than sorry. And that's just one of the changes that one of the things we have to endure. What about for you, mask wearing and stuff? I mean, tell us what your experience of the masks and how you had to use them, how and when.
I mean, every time we went inside, we had to wear them.
Mm,
And then when we were outside on the Camino, it was fine, except when we were crossing towns and there were people around us, we did put them on every time.
mm. Yeah, I found what I found was we're being back in England now. I don't know what it's like in Texas, but there's no more regulations here in England, so we don't have to wear masks. We don't have to social distance. But in Spain, it's all still being the regulations are still there. You have to wear a mask where there isn't an opportunity to keep to social distance, basically. So we would be walking through these small villages in the middle of nowhere, and there'd be someone up ahead, and they'd put a mask on because they see you. And so that's when I put a mask on because they put one on, kind of thing. So, and I would put one on just if I'm going to go past somebody. So that's how I found it. Like the Spanish are very, very, should we say, obedient on it. They're very strict on it. They're very hot on it, and they will put masks on, especially in the big cities and when you're walking past people. So make sure you've got a good supply of masks to take with you because at the moment, September the 12th, you definitely need them. Now, before we finish, I want to tackle a few things. Some members of your Camino family you'd like to say hello to.
Ooh, there's Lotte. Yeah, I'll say hi to her.
Okay, Lotte.
Yes.
Okay, Lotte, you were a good pilgrim friend, so thanks for being such a good pilgrim for Catherine. Maybe if you want to come on the podcast as well, you're more than welcome to. Just get in contact with us and let's. What were those? What were those? Existential questions if you're free feel to if you're happy to share them, one or two of them before you went and look at.
Yeah. It was really trying to figure out what I believed in, spiritual wise, but also about myself and about life. And I would say what I learned and what I took away from the Camino is to just be yourself and to listen to yourself and do what makes you happy. Have confidence in yourself and your beliefs. You don't have to follow what society is doing. You just really have to follow what comes from the inside. And it's okay not knowing what you want to do in 10 or 20 years from now, especially if you're young. That's something that I took away.
And I think you mentioned it as well during the interview. You said the words gut feeling. Would you say that's
Hmm.
something that you are listening to now
For
as
sure,
you
for
make
sure.
those kind of first steps of your professional career?
Yeah, I pay attention to my gut feeling way more now.
And when is the big day?
Oh, I don't know yet.
There's
We
no
don't know
date in the
yet.
diary. You don't know yet, but it's just good you've made the
No.
next step, right?
Yeah.
Good. Well, I want to wish
For
you
sure.
luck for the big day, whenever that's going to be, for when you eventually do tie the knot with your fiance. I want to thank you for being so honest and sharing, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Sometimes the difficult moments on your Camino. And you've come up with some great tips as well, about using the Buen Camino app, about taking the tennis shoes, the recommendations of the restaurants, the pulpo, the best pulpo in the world, supposedly, at the top of the mountain in Galicia. And as is customary on the Camino, you do sometimes come across, like you did in Gragnon, a sing-song, a place where everyone kind of
Hmm.
gets happy, clappy, and has a good sing-song together. Now, you don't have to sing, Catherine. I'm not going to make you do that. If you don't want to, if you do, you are more than welcome to. A song that we can put on our Camino playlists as we're getting in the mood for the Camino or trying to remember our last Camino?
Yes. So there was this song that I heard in an albergue. I stopped there just to have a coffee, and it's in Barrios de Colinas. The albergue is called Descanso de San Juan, and it's really cute. So check it out. Um, but there was a song playing, and it was Bonfire Heart by James Blunt, and it was my first time hearing it, and ever since I just played it on repeat the whole Camino. So that song definitely reminds me of the Camino.
It's nothing like a bonfire on the Camino, especially when you get to finish there and you're on the beach. So, dun, 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 bonfire hearts. That's a really bad
Yeah.
version of me singing it. I hope I didn't ruin it for you. So, Bonfire
No, you're good.
Heart by James Blunt. Add that to your Camino playlist. Catherine, thank you so much for being a wonderful first guest. And hopefully this will be the first of many podcasts that we're going to continue with. And any plans to go back on the Camino?
Oh, I would love to. Okay, now I'm working, and so taking that much time off is going to be difficult. So, but I definitely will go back. I want to do so many other caminos now. I really want to do the Camino del Norte and the Portuguese. So I will definitely go back, just probably not this year, next year.
When you can.
Exactly.
Catherine, thank you so much. Buen camino.
Buen camino.
So I really hope you enjoyed that first episode back. And just before we finish this episode, just to say thank you for all of your messages and your comments, which really inspired me to resurrect the podcast after I had to give up hosting because I had to get my life back on track after COVID threw it off the rails. But I do think I have done that now, and that's why I'm tentatively starting it up again. Every 2 weeks I will post a new episode. So thanks to Catherine, and to say a special thank you to Catherine, I will be sending an e-copy of my book, The Only Way is West, which is an international bestseller in humorous essays, travel logs, and travel writing in the UK, in Canada, and Australia on Amazon. And if you feel like you would like to have an audiobook version, then I'm going to give you a sample of that right now. So all you'd have to do is go into Amazon and search for The Only Way is West, and you'll see the Audible tag come up, and you'll be able to download it from there. Or conversely, you can get the paperback version and the ebook version on there as well. And just before I do that, I'm going to drop in one last review. And this was a review from John, who left this on the 25th of September 2020. And he said, "Hats off to Bradley. This is an absolute delight to read. It appeals to me as it's full of humour, but is also very poignant and moving in certain aspects. I have read it a couple of times now and still managed to chuckle on the second setting quite a bit. Marvellous book, particularly if you love travel reading. Can't recommend it enough." So I hope you enjoy this little audio snippet too. So here we go, an audio snippet from The Only Way is West. See you next week, guys. Thank you very much.
Chapter 25. The Running Man. Coming back to Earth after a long, uninterrupted sleep in the sweet solitude of a private room was nothing short of life-changing. A much better way to start the day than firing insults under my breath at the first faces I saw, as I'd done yesterday. In a perky mood, I left the albergue and within minutes began the long, tiresome climb up to O Cebrero. It was still dark, and my headlamp guided me through some chestnut woods, vineyards, and a clutter of villages. As usual, I saw no one but the odd grino and heard nothing apart from dogs playing bark tennis across the silent dawn. It was like listening to Monica Seles serve with a high-pitched squeal and having it returned by Serena Williams' deeper, guttural grunt. The sun surfaced at the perfect moment, taking the covers off Villafranca del Bierzo, a pretty village with a French influence famous for red wine. Cobbled streets, gated mansions and palaces, and the river Bobbia, passing under the arches of another majestic Roman bridge, were enough to make me consider staying put. I stopped to weigh up my options while I ripped open a pack of muesli bars and took in the ostentatious surroundings. Had it been a little later, I may well have stayed to explore, but with the whole town asleep and only a stray cat for company, I decided it was time to move on. Still feeling fresh after a revitalizing sleep, I knew there was no better time to attack O Sobrero. With the Galician border just a hike away and the altitude increasing with every step, the landscape began to change in character. Everything was greener. The soil underfoot was looser and sometimes muddy. Tall pines outnumbered and towered over chestnut trees. The air was cooler, and the occasional gusts of wind, scented with vanilla from the sap dripping off the pines, had more bite. Encounters with animals became more frequent. I passed wild donkeys and ponies roaming, and chickens and peacocks that ran for their lives when they saw me coming, diving into hedges as if they were being shot at. At one point, I had a standoff with a cow bearing huge horns blocking my way. I remembered reading about how cows were officially the most deadly large animal in Britain. 74 people, mostly farmers and walkers, butted, trampled or crushed to death in the previous 15 years. Would I be number 75? I did my best to stay calm as I realised it was probably a bull and stopped to check if I was wearing anything red that could make him charge. So far, he seemed okay. No smoke blowing from his nose or ears and no pawing the dirt with his forefeet. The space between him and the overgrown hedges on both sides was minimal. I could just make it past. I approached, cautiously. He stood still, swinging his tail, and I squeezed past him with my heart in my mouth. And to think I'd been worried about the dogs. Having survived a potentially life or death situation, I continued my ascent. From a high vantage point, I peered through a clearing between the trees and caught a view of the Greenos walking the shorter route along the motorway that hooked round the mountain. From my platform in the sky, they looked like an army of ants in procession as they followed each other along the road. I was so happy to be up in the silent heavens instead of taking the easier but less rewarding route by the roadside. I grabbed a big stick from the pine forest to gain some extra rhythm and went on my way, counting to 4 each time between pounding it into the dirt. Several strenuous but fulfilling hours later, the path briefly dived down again to Trabadello, before continuing upwards for another 18 hellish kilometres to O Sobrero. I bought some food in a supermarket and sat against a wall outside where I tore off pieces of baguette like a dog with a toy in its mouth. It soon became apparent that this was where the roadside route united with the mountain path, and the shop began to fill with a slew of people buying supplies. I quickly got off my numb arse and made tracks to stay ahead of the crowds. I was soon passing through a smattering of tiny mountain villages on my way into the pewter sky. I said a quick hello and goodbye to Portela. Felt sorry for the inhabitants of Vega de Valcárcel because of a noisy flyover marring an otherwise idyllic setting in a verdant valley. When I got to Herrerias, with 7 kilometres and the steepest part of the climb still to go, I took a welcome break. In a grassy picnic area with a cool mountain stream rushing by, I dipped my feet into the soothing water and was soon joined by a small group of Germans. None of them were very talkative, and silence prevailed until an American girl, Evelyn, arrived. Speaking German to the Germans and English with me, she was a ball of bubbly, positive energy, and her jolly presence perked everyone up. Further up, in La Faba, I met her again. Her invigorating company was just what I needed when I was zigzagging with tiredness and running on empty for the final push. She was at a stall on a hairpin bend in the road, talking to a dreadlocked Argentine guy selling handmade jewellery, painted rocks and other cheap but charming items. I stopped to see if anything caught my eye. What he was selling didn't. What he was drinking did. He had a flask of Mate, the tea I'd drunk with Norbert in Azofra and with my Argentine friends in Florida. Being a bit cheeky, I asked to try a little bit, and he was so impressed an Englishman knew his national brew, he insisted I'd drink the rest. As I sipped mate with this hip and happy guy, Evelyn said she needed to get going to keep her muscles warm. Not wanting to miss an opportunity to walk with her, I thanked the generous gent and we left together. Deepening my acquaintance with Evelyn, I found out she was a student of medieval Renaissance history, originally from Oregon but now living in New York City. Always full of surprises, when I oinked at some pigs in a field, she responded with the best horse impression I'd ever heard. "You speak pig?" she asked, as if it were a serious question. I don't speak pig, but I'm fluent in horse. Then she let off a horsey squeal, confirming she really did speak horse. Evelyn was a little loopy, but her eccentric character was a perfect fit for the Camino. Her wacky company kept me going for the last few kilometres, and we walked together across the Galician border and into O Sobrero. A concrete marker warned us of how close we were to the end of our adventure. 152 kilometres to Santiago. I was fast running out of pilgrimage and still wasn't ready for this epic adventure to end. Would anyone speak horse to me in England? I doubted it very much. In O Sobrero, we were on the roof of Galicia, looking across endless rows of gigantic green mountains, outgrowing each other like Matryoshka dolls under a galaxy of smoky clouds. The view, like gazing through an airplane window, was staggering, almost inconceivable. Checking into the albergue, I noted the back-breaking beds in the sleeping quarters and opted instead for a space on the floor in the overspill hall. In the kitchen, I was overjoyed to see Crazy Frank again for the first time since the middle of the Meseta. He was addressing 5 slightly confused-looking ladies who were sitting around him at the table. "Everybody touch the pussy," he said with a finger on his wrist. I balked. Someone had to stop him before he was put behind bars again. I was sure he was trying to say pulse, but pronouncing it pulsy, or rather pussy. I quickly stepped in. "Pulse. He means pulse," I said, my voice quivering in panic as I tapped my finger frantically on my wrist. Thankfully, none of the assembled ladies were native English speakers and so were unaware of the colloquial significance. I could only assume the reason he was telling the ladies to touch their pulses was to prove how such extreme altitude accelerated the heart rate. Crazy Frank's comedy English was turning into lewd, incarcerating English. As I led him out the kitchen, away from danger, he very nearly landed himself in trouble again. "Pussy, pussy," he said, blowing kisses at the ladies. I grabbed him by the collar of his anorak and dragged him away to the outside terrace. "No, pussy, Frank, never," I chided. "Pussy," I said, pointing south. "Is this for the ladies, for the girls?" Ah! He finally got it. "My country, Hungary, for pussy, kisses." His country was hungry for pussy kisses? I had no idea what he was talking about, but pressed the point again with a stern finger. Pussy, in English, never. Very bad. No. It was only later on, when his compatriot Bence made an appearance, that all the dots connected. The word pussy, in Hungarian, he told me, pronounced softly, like in pussycat, actually means kisses. I might well have just saved Crazy Frank's Camino from the pussy of death and another stint behind bars. Far more deserving of that sort of fate were the 2 coachloads of French plastic pilgrims who came from their lodgings to use our showers. Any chance of getting a hot shower on a cold mountain peak went down the drain when they raided our albergue. This was a prime example of what irritated me about the glory hunters. The hardcore grafting Greeno braved the wind, rain and sun to reach the top of the mountain, but missed out on hot water because of people who had their fat arses chauffeured up there. Being invited out for dinner with Evelyn and a group of Spaniards made up for the sense of injustice I felt at having been cheated out of a hot shower. In the restaurant next door, we grabbed a table for 6 and Evelyn introduced me to her Spanish friends. There were 2 guys, Jose and Santiago, and 3 girls, Nuria, Lera, and Monse. All were fantastic company and made me feel so comfortable and welcome in their group. Santiago, a train driver, was a towering, stocky guy with a grizzly auburn beard. I told him he didn't need a backpack and could store all his belongings in the bush on his chin. He laughed and gave me a pat on the back that nearly knocked me off my chair. He was a real gentle giant, and every time we saw each other on the road after the initial meeting, he gave me a thumbs up and a wink. I could see in his eyes a timidness that undermined his macho appearance. His friend, Jose, a PE teacher, looked more like a typical Spaniard. Short, dark, slicked back hair, olive skin and big brown happy Spanish eyes. The girls with them were full of questions. Where was I from? What was my job? Did I have a girlfriend? Why was I there on the Camino? They were the first Spaniards I'd met that spoke very good English, and this was the first time I'd connected with the natives. Throughout dinner, Evelyn conversed with them in fluent Spanish, and I sat back in quiet admiration. What a show-off she was! German with the Germans, horse with the horses, and now Spanish with the Spaniards. I let the locals take the lead in ordering some Galician specialities. For an incredibly economical €9, we were served little noodles swimming in chicken soup, fresh fish and potato skin chips. I was told to pull the flakes of fish from the bone, douse them in lemon juice and wolf them down coated in their crispy golden skin. The chips were possibly the tastiest I'd ever had, still with their skins on and dipped in a garlic-flavoured sauce. We remained at the table long after we'd finished eating, and I felt so incredibly blessed to have been invited out with such a great bunch. Later that evening, I met more fantastic people, once again thanks to my new friendship with Evelyn, who knew everybody. In a cobbled cul-de-sac of thatched cottages, souvenir shops and cheap hostels presided over by a 9th century stone church, pilgrims had congregated outside a bar. I got talking to an American I'd seen numerous times on the road doing something insane. Running the Camino. He wore a white baseball cap backwards, a quick-drying nylon t-shirt, and running shorts and shoes. Without fail, he always carried a walking staff and had run past me with it several times like a Neanderthal hunter with a spear. Finally, I could put a name to the face. Brad was an early 40s lecturer in law at Columbia University in New York City. He spoke fluent Spanish too and was good friends with another pilgrim. "Meet Luis, my long-lost brother," Brad said, bidding me to shake hands with none other than the yodeling maniac from Grañón. "Hola!" Luis said, grabbing my one hand with his two before launching into a laugh. Luis laughed after everything he said, and even though I couldn't understand most of what he said, I laughed too, and so did everybody else. He was such a funny character, with a captivating presence and personality. You couldn't help but love him. It was hard to believe this guy was 53 years old when he was acting his shoe size. Every move he made had an air of childish mischief about it, and he seemed to take nothing seriously. As he sank beer after beer, he described the forthcoming terrain to Brad, Evelyn and me. "Bing bong, bing bong, bing bong," he said, making hand signals to show the going would be all ups and downs. As usual, he let out wild, infectious laughter after he spoke, and we couldn't help but follow, even though we didn't know what was so funny. I asked Brad to explain to him that I thought he was the priest in Grañón because he'd taken the pilgrim service. In response, he slapped the table in amusement, threw his head back, and guffawed at my incorrect assumptions. What a personality he was! I want to be like Luis when I grow up, I thought. While the laughter rang out, another of Evelyn's many acquaintances, Piotr, a real Polish priest, joined us at the table. "I was hoping to be able to take some services in some of the towns, but I haven't been allowed," he said with a palpable disappointment. "Oh, that's so gay," Brad blurted out in an unnecessarily brusque manner. After that, Piotr fell quiet and didn't add much to the conversation. I actually thought he was quite cool, and all of us were a little flabbergasted by Brad's off-key reaction. A typical, straight-talking New Yorker. Evelyn, feeling a little uncomfortable and adroit at putting everyone around her at ease, quickly changed the subject. Luis sat there in ignorant bliss, in his own happy world, smoking a cigarette, drinking his beer and looking around for something or someone to laugh at. Just before bed, I spoke briefly with an Italian I recognised from the albergue in Hospital de Orbigo. Since then, I'd been carrying an extra sleeping mat that someone had left behind and that I thought might be missed. I showed him the mat, but he insisted it wasn't his. The conversation didn't go much further due to the language barrier. He made a humorous and unnecessary apology for his lack of English, In my head is English, is Francia, is German, is Spaniolo, is Italiano, is the land of confusion. Mamma mia, he cried, with his head in his hands. Yomping 37 kilometres up a mountain had been punishing for my body, but the payoff for my spirit had been huge, thanks to the glittering personalities that had lit up the day. On the cold, hard, laminated flooring of the hall in the albergue, I got cocooned in my sleeping bag and let the first Galician night swallow me up. I fell asleep with one beautiful thought. Isn't it wonderful to be alive?